Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's your boy Seth Garu Baxter with Maker's Bar, where we're creating 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. Today we have a special guest, and I'm hoping to adopt him as my spiritual brother. 4-time international bestseller of Influence with a Heart, and a sometime spiritual coach. We're going to find out what that's about. And just before we get into that, if you are enjoying the content that you're getting from Maker's Bar, please press like, subscribe, and share this channel. It helps us in the algorithm with YouTube and all the other social platforms we're on. Besides which, we'd love to have your company, enjoying our guests, and we'd like to see what you're doing, what you're thinking about it. We'd like to have you share. Ben, thank you so much for joining us today. Ben Gioia, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us. How are you today, sir?
So good, Seth Guru. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm so glad we found each other. The conversation before today was super fun, and I'm glad we get to continue.
It certainly was. I said, I'm going to do my best to adopt you as my spiritual brother. You just, since the moment first coming encountered with your profile, and what immediately caught my attention was the sometimes spiritual coach. But in addition to that was Influence with the Heart. You have a number of different adventures, and I'm hoping for us to be able to get into some of those today. And starting with your origins, what's your background and where do you hail from?
Oh my goodness. There's so many origins to the origin story. So from New York, originally around the city, and lived there for a bunch of my life. Yeah. So never going to walk away from that place in my heart.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then had the pleasure of being in California, mostly around the Bay Area, for about 19 years, which was absolutely fantastic as well. And then 16 months ago, I moved to Spain, and
wow.
Life has changed so fantastically, deliciously, and every day is more and more wonderful discovery.
Absolutely. So Spain, that's an interesting decision. Why Spain, if you don't mind me asking?
A bunch of different reasons. The lifestyle, the art, the music, the pace, which is non-urgent, which is really, really good for me. I was pushing too hard when I was in the US. I grew up in New York and then lived in California. So it was push, hustle, push, hustle, push, hustle. And I was like, wow, if I keep this up, something bad is going to happen. Either I'm going to get really ill or get hit by a bus. Like something is going to stop me. So I was like, all right, let me make some choice. And that was a big part of why I came to Spain. And, unfortunately, challenges of the United States that are not just happening now. I mean, I've been struggling with things for the last 25 years. And every country, of course, has its stuff, but it seems to be extra loud and extra impactful in the United States. And I just didn't want to be in the mix with that anymore.
It's definitely changing. I'm finding myself, people I've encountered, in particular since the dramatic change in the election and how the atmosphere has changed in our spirits. And you definitely find that there is a hectic type of unsettled feeling. And hopefully my goal is with Maker's Bar and persons like yourselves, we are a part of what brings sanity and some calm.
Exactly. I actually did a post today about almost what you just said, just in different words of, we're the ones who have the honor and privilege and challenge to make the change.
Absolutely.
We hope that there's some people in government who are, thinking logically and with kindness and humanism, and we know there are a bunch of people aren't, and there are a whole bunch of people who are, just not making a solid move in either direction. So, we get to step up and move the needle in a good way for everyone.
Absolutely. Ben, tell us what got you on this path. Tell us your childhood story a little bit, and what led you here, where you're at now.
Yeah, thank you. So probably the biggest thing was an extreme amount of suffering.
I didn't expect that one.
Somebody asked me that recently, and that popped in. I was like, you know what? That's really what it is. So in my 20s into my early 30s, I used to do a lot of drugs. First of all, it's not sustainable. Number two, it's very expensive. But the tricky part for me was that I was really successful in business and I was getting better jobs. Back in the day, I had a magazine production career, big titles, Modern Bride, Condé Nast Traveler, the AARP magazine, which I helped to launch. And it was all great stuff. But sooner or later, you find your way to rock bottom, as they say. And I found my way to rock bottom. And I had been to India for a couple of months in 2004, not quite on the spiritual tip, more on the party tip, but I was doing some yoga and I actually found my way to Reiki, or just opened the door with Reiki, which was really interesting. Got back to the States and got back into the bad habits and probably got into a few worse habits. Like, here's one drug that I haven't done yet. Like, let's add that to the mix, right? Just all of this, kind of horror show stuff. And then, like I said, found the rock bottom and I was like, what do I do? I was like, I know, I'm going back to India. That was the answer. So I went back and I did a month of volunteering where I actually lived with a family in the Himalayas, up 12,000 feet high, farming barley for like a month, which was completely unexpected. Not that I was planning for that, but I found my way to that. And then did a 9-day trek through the Himalayas with some guides and some friends. And we're talking really hard trek, like 6 to 8 hours a day, doing a 16,000 foot high pass every other day, just hard trekking. And silly me, because I was on drugs before I got there, I didn't show up. I didn't show up with good hiking boots. I had my old crappy ones and I ran around the city of Leh, Ladakh. Does anybody have a size 13 American or size 47 European? And they're like, nope. Right. And I was like, oh no. So I find a cobbler on the street and I get him to fix it. And he fixes all the stuff on my boots, fixes the soles, which are key, with airplane tire rubber of all things.
Wow. Go figure.
Yeah. And then he fixes some other things. And in the fixing of the other things, puts some extra fabric and some extra glue, which makes 2 little bumps on the parts of the shoes that touch the Achilles tendons. So before lunch of day 1, pardon me, I had the 2 biggest blisters on each of the Achilles tendons. And then I had to continue hiking for those 6 to 8 hours a day, those 9 days. So talk about suffering and pain. And there's the physical pain, like every single pain step was ow, ow, ow. But there was also the addition of the suffering, right? You jerk, what are you, an idiot? How could you do that? How could you forget that, right? What are you, stupid? Just all that chatter. So pain, suffering. And then I get to day 6 and I'm looking at the mountains, the Himalayas, and I'm like, wow, everything is so beautiful. Why is it so beautiful? I'm not on drugs. Why is it so beautiful? And I realized, and this was before I had meditation in my life. For the first time in my life, I've been in the present moment essentially for 6 days straight because of each painful footstep.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah, complete mind blower. I was like, this is what they mean by the present moment. This is why it's so powerful. This is why they call it a gift. Like all of these things are running through my head. So I continue the hike and the pain is no different. It's still ow. But the pain is now in the background. And I'm looking at the beautiful stuff around me and I'm enjoying myself. Right. And I've taken the suffering out of the pain experience. Right. The pain is there. Okay, it's there. Right. But I wasn't hanging out in the suffering anymore. But that understanding of that difference between pain and suffering, that took an additional 12 years. Right. When I looked back, I was like, that's what the big lesson was. Right. Pain is part of our experience. Suffering is ultimately optional.
And so that brought you to what conclusion?
First and foremost, that we don't have to suffer. And right at that time, in the India time, I did my first meditation retreat and really got deeply into the teachings of the Buddha. And the Buddha was like, hey, here's this path out of suffering. And I was like, this guy, he gets it.
So that's what brings a lot of your peace?
It does. It definitely does. And in subsequent years, as I took on book coaching as an official, work that I'm doing, which is now 5 years all of a sudden, I realized that, you don't have to suffer through the book writing either. There's a lot of people associate book writing and struggle. And if it's a novel, it's like alcoholism and drug addiction and all these things. And it's like, no, right? You can write a book. Not that it's not hard, right? I mean, certainly putting a heart and soul into it, but you don't have to suffer to bring a great book to the world.
And book coaching, how do you coach someone in writing a book?
Yeah, so a couple different things. First and foremost, before we start writing, I have my authors have conversations with their ideal clients. So we're talking about business books here, right? So talk to your ideal clients, I tell them, for two reasons. One is because you want to guarantee your book is going to work before you bring it into the world, because otherwise it's a tremendous bummer. And number two is you want to use the book before it's published, even before it's being finished being written, to attract clients and strategic partners and referral partners. So I teach my authors how to do all of that through that conversation process. 20 minutes, 12 questions, complete game changer for their book. So they get that great foundation, potential client, strategic partner. They get the lens for the book, the language for the book, because they're getting it from the proverbial horse's mouth. And then I coach them through the writing. I have a very optimized process, 5 to 13 weeks for a first draft, because I do things like I give them a blueprint to follow. I say, I don't want you thinking about the logistics of the book. I want you to just focus on the people you're serving and the content. Let me worry about the logistics. Right. And then I encourage things like dictation as part of the process. It doesn't mean a whole dictated book unless they want, but some people find that it's much, much easier to edit after dictating something rather than writing from scratch. Some people think they can't write so well, or they try to write and they try to choose words and they get all stuck in their head. And I'm just like, teach your thing. Right? You're an expert in your stuff. Teach your thing. So that's another part of it. And then, just the whole time I'm doing business coaching, trying to keep them leveraging the book, making use of the book, for their business and for impact. And then I help them hold their hands through the publishing, and we do some more strategic stuff and bring their book to the world.
Now, is this somewhere where Influence with the Heart comes in?
Exactly that. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Tell us about that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So my business is called Influence with a Heart. My second book and part of my third book title both involve influence with a heart. And the big fun story behind this is that in my original business was called Marketing with a Heart, and my first book was called Marketing with a Heart, both of which sound like what they sound like, right? No big surprises there. And then 2016, I wanted to pivot into Influence with a Heart because I figured that would give me more flexibility. I wasn't just going to be the marketing guy. Now it would be leadership, influence, communication, team excellence, whatever. So I changed one word on my LinkedIn profile, literally. And at this point, I'm positioning myself as a public speaker. Somebody reaches out from an event planning company and she says, hey, we see you're a speaker and we have these visiting business people coming from a company in Sydney, Australia. They're going to go tour around Silicon Valley to the headquarters of Google and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. Then they're going to come to Stanford for 2 days of leadership and influence training. Do you want to give the training? And I was like, holy crap, of course I want to give the training. I don't know how you found me, but yes. So we worked out all the details, the curriculum, signed the contract. And I said to the event planner, I said, I really want to make this special and memorable because these folks are literally coming from the other side of the world. I'm going to show up with autographed copies of my brand new book for everyone who's coming for free, 130 books for free. I'll stick around for autographs and pictures afterwards. It would be my pleasure. She's like, wow, that's amazing. They're going to love it. I said, see you soon. And I hung up the phone and I went, oh, crap. I have to write that book that I just promised.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it gets better because from the promise to the event where I needed to have the books in my hand, 6.5 weeks.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So I wrote it in 3, got it produced, printed, and shipped 3 in the other 3. Showed up with books, and the event went really well, which was fantastic. The event planning company hired me 3 more times. I think it was twice at Stanford, one at the University of Washington, and the audience company hired me the next year to speak in Sydney, Australia. I did 2 speaking gigs there. First day in English to an English-speaking audience. Second day in English, simultaneously translated in Chinese. That was pretty wild. Yeah.
Seriously.
It was really, really cool. And then if we back up in time slightly to when I was frantically writing the book, I got the book cover designed and I put it up on LinkedIn and I said, hooray, I'm so excited. My new book is going to be out soon. Celebrate with me. And somebody reached out and he said, hey, I'm a consultant. I'm working on this project with the Fortune 100 company in collaboration with MIT. We're making a mindfulness and empathy video game that's going to be played by 20,000 customer experience employees. We saw your book, and in my head, I'm like, you only saw the cover of the book, right? But we saw your book. We'd like you to write the curriculum. And I went, of course I'll write the curriculum. Again, I don't know how this happened, but here we are. And that turned into 10 months of consulting with this Fortune 100 company. And it was out of those 2 experiences, the Stanford and then the Fortune 100, that I put my whole business together, because I realized about 2 years later, I was like, oh, I can help people through all that. I can help them write a high quality book real fast, connect it to their ideal clients, get the clients ahead of time, and make sure it works before they bring it into the world.
So describe influence with the heart. How does Ben Gioia do that?
That's a really good question. Thank you.
For sure.
I think that answer changes and evolves.
I would imagine so. Really speaking about that, I imagine sometimes, having done some public speaking myself, your audience sometimes helps to dictate where you're going to go with that. So I'd imagine that would be correct.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And I appreciate them for that. Influence with the heart, right? High intentionality, high integrity, in the helping of the people, a whole lot of empathy, whole lot of story, a whole lot of owning one's thought leadership or expertise, as a function of being able to make a bigger impact in the world, doing business from a place of win-win-win, right? Good for you, good for the client, good for everybody else that gets impacted by the work, and I want to use the California term, but I don't think we can use it on here. A blank ton of
fill in blank
of awareness and loving kindness, really foundationalizing and driving the whole thing. Because for me, it's I want to help a bunch of people. I want people to be happy and free and fully expressed, and for whatever I can do to further that'd be great, because the more of that we have in the world, the more people we have stepping up as leaders on every level, and the more we drown out the bullies that are trying to be bullies right now in the world.
I have this thing I say at the end of each of the show that started over about, good 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. The revolution is the love-olution. And that many years ago, it was important because I was working with a number of young people in high school in government, teaching them about government. And at that time, they were saying we needed more love, and what can we do to do that? And it would be a revolutionary thing to have this huge impact if we were all operating through a love vibe and channeling that in all of our work and influencing with love. And the goal was to have the young people I was working with, when you talk to the other kids that you're working with, influence them with the love-olution. And I couldn't say how timely it is, what you're saying for now, considering the most recent events and the times that we're living in. Influence with the heart is, it couldn't be better put. Now, I want to ask you, so I've just written a book on how to sell better, just as a general question. So how me, as the author who wrote that, now for my company, how can I influence with the heart? How does my leadership style change? What are some examples on leading to or influencing with the heart, leading my company and influencing with the heart?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. So I'd say the first part is, because I don't know what research you've done or how you've prepared this book, right? But I would
It's
first,
in general. It's just
yeah, yeah. I don't know how you've prepared this hypothetical book.
yeah.
But the first thing I would say is, did you talk to your ideal clients? Because so much of selling and traditional approaches to selling are broken or no longer functioning. But so many people still operate in those old ways. So first and foremost, are you talking to people to see what they need? Of course, they want to sell better, more effectively. Yes, but what else do they need to do that? Right? What challenges are they facing? What's their experience? Why are they there in the first place? What's their intention behind it? And can you help them through what you're teaching? Can you help them keep connecting to the humanity that's the foundation of all of this? Right? Because so many times, in the space of business and transactional reality, right, we lose track of the fact, even for a moment, of like, oh, there's a human at the other end of this, or there's a human that's going to make this decision, or there's a human being who's going to be the beneficiary, we hope, of this decision, and it's going to affect their family, their spouse, their kids college, right? There's all this impact, all this interdependence. So, we have a huge responsibility here. And it doesn't mean that we have to do everything for everybody and save the world, right? That's exhausting and that would burn us out. But, are you acting in integrity in what you're teaching, what you're bringing forth through that book? And are you encouraging the people that you're teaching to act with, love, integrity, etc.? This could be the Levolution sales book, right?
It can. I'm going to keep that in mind. That in mind. Now, I'm very fascinated with this thought that I attended this seminar years ago. Insight. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Insight.
I'm not sure, actually.
It's very similar to the work of your book, Influence with the Heart. And when you attend it, without me giving proprietary information away, the goal is living with intention, and your heart is the guideline or the guidepost of that intention. So in any activity of your business, so rather than just thinking, I need to make X amount of dollars, it is from my heart's intention, how can I make things better and thereby get a financial reward? Or you want to grow your business with your heart's intention. How can you grow your business that it not only benefits your business, but it benefits those you employ? And influence with the heart, and that's sometimes spiritual coaching you're talking about. This is what I'm understanding, that what you're talking about, influence with the heart, leading with your heart in all your decision making.
Yeah, beautifully said. I appreciate the parallels there, and it's funny because the sometimes spiritual coach.
That still just makes me smile. I love that.
That was only a fairly recent addition to my LinkedIn profile. And it's so funny because when I first became an entrepreneur, goodness gracious, 15 years ago, right? Became an entrepreneur, struggled a lot for the first 10 because I had no idea what I was doing, right? Until I figured out the book stuff. But I remember when I very, very, very first started, I was like, okay, what do I want to do? And how do I want to be? And at that point, public speaking was big on my radar. I said to myself, I don't want to be a spiritual coach. I have no idea why, but it's just like, I don't want to do that. So, do all the things and then have all my experiences around spirituality and meditation and all sorts of breakthroughs and finding my way from, a practice that didn't work so well for me, for 14 years and then, into one that really does work for me. And then as I'm teaching my book stuff and helping people bring their message across, I kept teaching stuff, spiritual stuff. I'm just going to call it that for convenience sake. So sometimes I would teach things around meditation or mindfulness or loving kindness or forgiveness, which is a big one. I was a hospice volunteer for about 3 years in San Francisco when I lived there. Yeah. That's a hell of a teaching bunch of teachers. So I started integrating some of what I learned from hospice into my book coaching. For example, we do an exercise, that brings people face to face with their death. But before you go, what's the message you're going to leave the world? Right. And that's a incredibly galvanizing activity. Right. So it was just as I was folding more of these things in, I was like, I'm embedding the spiritual stuff just into everything that I'm teaching. And I'm not trying to, right? It's just, I just am doing it naturally as part of the process. And then maybe it was about 6 months ago, a client of mine, a book writing client of mine, was like, hey, would you ever consider being my spiritual coach? And I was like, sure. and we started, I think the following week, we meet for 30, 45 minutes and, talk about his practice, his journey, et cetera. And I talk about what I think I know or have half a clue about and share a lot of my own experience. And try to integrate, for example, I've read and studied a lot of what the Buddha taught from a bunch of different teachers, Tibetans and Zens and, the different Vipassanas and all these things. It's really interesting that what the Buddha originally taught is not what all of the branches of the Buddha the teachers teach these days, right? Like some things got lost over the years. So to find, our way to the actual teachings, and I'm not trying to say this as a way of my teaching is better, not at all, right? It's not that, but the Buddha was one of those people who, he figured it out from looking inward, which is completely nuts, 2,600 years ago. And he's like, here's how to do it. And he laid it out for people. And, just in the subsequent 2,600 years, you go from oral tradition, to then the first person who wrote down what the Buddha taught, or one of the first people, was a scholar and not a meditator. So he lost some of what the Buddha taught through that. Right? And there are other ways where it stayed intact. But it's just, it's so interesting that, the Buddha, with other teachers too, right? Not just him, but, we have all the answers already. We've had the answers for thousands of years at this point. It's like, what's the problem?
You bring up an interesting point. How does one begin that journey, though? Is it that they hit the rock bottom that you mentioned earlier? Or because I find sometimes some people are walking in a haze. So how do they, what triggers the inner journey? I know going to Burning Man, this is one.
Yep. That was I haven't been since 2007, but that was certainly galvanizing.
Yes. And it was around that time was my last time as well.
Yeah.
But I did find, there's some people, Burning Man is like a part of that journey. You have this calling to go there. And this is just an example. But I know it was for me in particular. It wasn't just the hedonism of it, and as so many people think, but it was the journey itself. But I did encounter people who they sometimes are in a haze, and it's like they don't know what they're waiting for. And to me, it's that trigger to go on this inner journey. Yeah. Now, is there something else that you might see or that you found in your work? How does one begin this inner journey? What happens? Is it only hitting rock bottom, or is it the call of Burning Man? For me, I was already on that path. And when I went to Burning Man, not drug induced my first time, But
Yeah.
but going there, it was to be surrounded by a community of people that were thinking, we're just here in a community, and that really was my goal. But
Yeah.
that also set off a part of that it triggered for me that inner discovery. And
Yeah.
so I'm curious, what do you find triggers that for some people going on that inner journey?
Yeah, I think it's an array of things. Yeah, this is a really great question. So for a lot of people, it is suffering, which doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go on a path, right? Because some people just go into a deeper level of avoidance. And I'm not saying this judgmentally or critically, right? Just people respond to things in different ways. But I know for a lot of people, suffering can, when you're just fed up with everything, and suicide isn't a good option. It's like, okay, well, what can I do?
I didn't expect that. Yes.
If I'm still going to be around, so yeah, so that's one. Another one is can certainly be some stellar parenting, that really, really supports, the flowering and unfolding of one's children. And, which isn't a guarantee that the child will be spiritual, right? Like, I mean, there's so many factors in the mix, but I know some, incredibly transcendent, for lack of a better word, parents who've, brought these beings into the world, and these kids are like, they have decades of wisdom and they're like 7. Just like, wow.
Yes.
So that's super fun. And then I think another big thing is service. Practicing service, because very often in the context of being in service or being of service to people, you are witnessing their challenge, their suffering, their struggle, etc., and having the opportunity, first to meet them empathetically, right, and then hopefully if somebody is guiding you in the right way, moving from empathy to compassion, right? Because empathy is a wonderful thing, but empathy is where burnout can happen if we don't hold the line, right? So that's one of the things I love the most about what I learned from Tibetan Buddhist teachers, right? Was how do you move to compassion, right? So yes, feel it, notice it, recognize it, etc. And that's not you, that's them, that's their experience. Don't take it on, because you're going to create suffering for yourself, and you're not going to be able to help them if you take all of that on. So what have we said so far? Suffering, service, good parenting, near-death experiences. Those are a good one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I've had my array of those.
I have too.
Yeah. So that's that got galvanizing. What's that?
No, I'm sorry. Not too long ago, I had a near death with a cancer diagnosis.
Oh man.
And yes, and it's interesting that you bring it up, because I felt as if I was already on this path, and I really was having this newer awakening that was calling, and then all of a sudden, I get a diagnosis. Hey, you have nodules of cancer, and I already felt, hey, wait a minute, why? I finally got it together. But I will say, it also it not only my life's journey was already triggered, but it pushed it even more forward, because I really had to look at not only the diagnosis, but I really started self-examining, what am I leaving? And it did engage me in further spiritual pursuit. It really did engage me in discovering other areas that bring me happiness. And not only that, but where else can I be of service? And I've been so used to, you brought up such a fantastic point. I'm glad people heard you say it. There, you can have empathy so much that you get to burnout as well. And so I felt I had already contributed a great deal of my service with empathy, but it was that burnout. But during this whole thing, I did a number of different days of fasting, and different health alternatives and so forth with doing it. So I'm clean today, no cancer, no nothing. But I will say it definitely did enhance my spiritual evolution and maturation. And spiritually, I can say that really enhanced my desire to get more into this present moment, because that's one of my favorite things that you said as well. And I think we forget it is so important to really be in the present. And we hear it a lot, but I don't know that people get to experience a lot because we're so busy. But so getting triggered with this definitely helped to make that more evident to me, being present.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate you sharing all that, and I'm glad there was a happy ending to
Absolutely.
to your story there. Yeah,
So
yeah. It's so fascinating, how life reveals stuff to us. Life, the universe, God, whatever words you want to use. Believer or not in anything, that there's a lot going on, obviously, in the universe. So much more than we can possibly conceive, and it's all connected.
absolutely.
Right? So even if you don't believe a darn thing, you're going to get information.
Absolutely.
And let me say that even better. You're getting information constantly. We're all getting information constantly, right? So are we paying attention? Right? Are we filtering out?
That's the key.
Yeah, yeah.
What was the biggest who or what book was the biggest inspiration that during the height of maybe with with drugs and or previous childhood experiences? What was the biggest inspiration for you that you feel attributed to where you're at now?
That's a really good question too. If I had to bring it down to one, I would say my first 10-day silent meditation retreat.
Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. So really, really fascinating. So I had very spare, shall we say, experience with meditation before I said, okay, I'm going to do a 10-day retreat. And I was in India. I had done that. I had done the volunteer bit, the farming barley, and I had done the 9-day trek. And then I was in an area. I was actually in a place in India called McLeod. It's where the Dalai Lama's monastery is.
Yes.
Really, really neat place. I got to see him a few times, which was super fun. He's so cute.
I got to meet him as well. He and Desmond Tutu.
Oh,
It was
wow.
incredible.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Good for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. So thank you. So I signed up for the retreat, and yeah, it was a really hard practice. It's not the practice that I do anymore, but it was a really hard practice. With a lot of sitting for a lot of hours every day. Walking in between, but a lot of sitting, and sitting on the floor cross-legged or some variation of cross-legged. Most Westerners are not used to that, right? So there's just a lot of suffering in the physicality of it, and a couple of really incredible things happened. But I think the biggest one was I think the sixth day, deep in the meditation, and all of a sudden, in my mind's eye, if you will, I see this person in front of me, wearing clothes that are not contemporary, and I look, behind him are all these mountains, and immediately I was just like, oh, this is a past life vision.
Wow.
Yeah, and I didn't spend my time thinking or caring about past lives. I heard people talk about that stuff through my life, but it was not, on my radar. It was not in my area of interest. And suddenly I'm sitting there and it was just like, bam, this is what this is. And I went, oh, okay. Right. And, for my subsequent understanding is this idea of, the continuation of consciousness, from lifetime to lifetime, right? Not reincarnation per se, right? It's not an identical, but that there's something that's going, from time to time to time. And I realized that, so much that I'd been around the block quite a while. I mean, according to how the Buddha says it, right, from beginningless time, that we've been on, the wheel of samsara, right? We keep coming through. And, so that was fascinating and terrifying. And also it helped me understand, the approach that the Buddha takes. He's like, hey, there can be joy in life, but, suffering is embedded in everything that changes constantly, and everything in our existence changes constantly. So ultimate happiness, is not in this existence. It's in a time, place, however you want to describe it, that doesn't change. Right. So that's what he taught of how do we get out of this existence into this, non-changing place, nirvana, nibbana, that kind of terminology. And basically where the translation is, it's an extinguishing, so it's not all the thoughts and the up and down and the black and white and all the things, right? It's just, all these things that we really can't put words in. There are no words for it because, it transcends like all of our experience here. And it sounds pretty great.
It really does. It was making me feel very peaceful. I'm curious. So part of this is what you spiritually coach as well, and how to reach some of this nirvana, and that you give them lessons in meditation practices, etc.
Yeah. So I would not, I am not like, a root teacher, like a practice teacher in this. There's the practice that I've moved on to, and the teachers that I work with, like the person that I'm coaching, I'm directing him to those resources, those core teachings, etc. And then I'm coaching him on practicing, implementing, integrating, that kind of thing. Like I, wouldn't presume to be able to say, okay, come on Ben's retreat around this. Like, just that I'm not skilled on that level for teaching. Maybe someday, who knows, right? But I'm skilled enough to be able to, for somebody who's paying attention to that stuff, I can give them feedback, give them guidance from my own experience, having practiced this particular path for, I guess, about 6 years now.
In some of your spiritual coaching, or not in some, in your spiritual coaching, do you primarily work with men, or are women a part of your clientele as well?
Yeah, thank you. So in the straight spiritual coaching, one person, one client, it's a guy. But in the book coaching, where a lot of the spirituality is embedded, it's a pretty even mix of women and men. When I first started the business, it's interesting. When I first started, the first couple of years, it was like 70-30 women to men. Mm-hmm. And then for whatever reason, it more flows back and forth around 50-50.
I'm curious, and this is not either of us necessarily being the expert in it, but I'm just curious, do you find men these days are more in need of spiritual influence and guidance than women? And it's not to be gender oriented or PC, but is that what you're finding?
That's a really good question. So I don't know if I would say, well, now that you're getting me to think about this, yeah, I think women are, I don't know, genetically, cosmically, all those kinds of words, more spiritual because they are, more deeply connected to the, full unfolding of life. I mean, they give birth, for goodness sake, right? Yes. And their bodies are, working with the moon and stuff. Like, there's a pretty solid spiritual connection just by default, which is pretty wild. And I think at an incredibly high level of empathy. Not every single woman, of course, but there's just.
I met a few who have very little empathy.
Yes. But just a lot more community, a lot more love, a lot more caring, a lot more physical touch. Woman to woman. Which like human touch, right? Just it's part of how we, how I see many women talking to each other, right? There's touching, there's hugging, and I see a lot less of that with guys. I mean, there are certainly more and more, in touch men and men who are more connected to let's say their feminine side or their feminine energy. And I think a significant reason why the world is so screwed up in a great many ways, is because of the men, right, who are stuck in, a whole bunch of old patterns around patriarchy, right, around toxic masculinity, around a lack of spirituality, a lack of empathy, an incredible amount of fear, plus things like, I got to be the provider and the hunter, and there's a lot of that leftover stuff too, and aspects of that are fantastic, nourishing, part of our human evolution, and some of that stuff, when it's not what's the word, sublimated, I guess, appropriately, ends up getting all squirrely and going sideways, and then we have fights and wars and oppression and genocide and all these things. It's like, come on, everybody, we're waking up. On the whole, we're waking up for sure. Stop being a jerk. Right? For goodness sake. And I want to use several stronger words, but I'll
we will from now on say insert blank.
Exactly.
It is something. I think at least what I'm seeing, I'm noticing there seems to be our brethren who I'm seeing, where there is a desire for them to be more connected to a softer version of themselves. But I've also seen where it takes a dramatic turn and they feel lost. And so to me, part of what this journey is finding that healthy balance between masculinity and emotionality. And to me, spirit is the great equalizer that brings in the compassion and empathy. And I'm just curious, in your work, are you finding more men who are feeling, hey, I feel like I'm right here in touch with my spirit, but I just need a little push over that edge? And that's where your coaching comes in. Are you finding that? Or are you just finding some men or clients who just they feel completely lost and they just need someone to totally direct them in there? Or are you seeing a shift, or maybe not?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm definitely seeing a shift. There's also the work that I've been doing on myself and my own shifting. So I think in doing so, I'm connecting, with more people who are more in tune, such as yourself, right? There's certainly a part of that. And, I'm not really seeing, for the folks that I'm interacting with, like people who are like, I have no idea. I think it's more like, there's some level of, spirituality, practice, connection to something greater, coupled or running alongside, trying to run a business and make an impact and be helpful. And maybe they have a family to support and stuff like that. And, they're struggling around, like there's a lot of turmoil around all of that stuff. So for me, it's, how can we get to, a mostly peaceful feeling most of the time?
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. I think, and that's that contentment. I often have utilized this expression. I don't always seek happiness. I seek contentment.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Now, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to extend to that a little bit more, because a lot of times, people strive for happiness, and I'm using the word strive specifically, like they're trying to get to happiness. It is.
Yes.
And it often is externally dictated, or they think, if I do the thing or get the thing, or even if I just meditate more, I'm going to get happy, right? Like, they're putting all of this, pressure and construct around it. And it's like, what the Buddha taught, what a lot of other, fabulous spiritual teachers teach, is that the contentment comes from letting go of so many things. Like letting go of the things that hook us in both directions, like, not getting hooked on the crazy amounts of pleasure. So we're chasing after it, like, more drugs, more sex, more rock and roll, like that kind of stuff. And so we're not pushing away the pain. I mean, it doesn't mean like, like if you cut yourself, put a Band-Aid on it, right? We're not, we're keep wisdom as part of the process here, but
absolutely.
But basically to not take either end of the spectrum personally, just to recognize that here's what's happening. Here's how reality is manifesting in this moment, right? How do I not get hooked in either direction so I can stay peaceful, not create any agitation by chasing one or chasing the other? And the more peaceful I can be, the more I can be hanging out with my intuition, and I can just act spontaneously. And, that's just going to feel good, even if the situation doesn't feel good.
Oh, I dig it. I think that's perfectly said. And it's actually a good place to switch gears. You also have a podcast and a radio show. Tell us about that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So we're not actively recording right now. full disclosure. But I did, a dear friend and colleague who helps people create podcasts and radio shows. She has a great approach. She says, hey, if you're going to make a podcast, make a radio show first, and then turn the radio shows into podcasts, right? So you get the leverage of global radio first, 185 countries or something nutty like that. And then you get the platform aspect of having these podcasts, and then you're not inventing twice, right? You're repurposing. Yeah. So I did a season of a podcast with her, called, or a radio show and podcast with her called Business Podcasting Made Easy. So we literally walked through the process of here's how you make a business podcast, right? How you conceive of it and execute it. And, we didn't go into like crazy depth on things, but we did it comprehensively. Some of it around content, some of it around getting guests, advertising, a little bit on tech, and with the punchline being, hey, you don't need much to start getting your voice into the world, so there's no need to wait because somebody's waiting for you, right now. Yeah. So then out of that, I did a few episodes of my own podcast, which I'm going to revisit. I'm not sure if it's later this year or next year, because I'm starting to write book number 5 right now. But
we got the scoop. Got the scoop.
Yes. But that podcast is called the Book Brand and Business Podcast. So it's basically oriented around book writing, but strategic book writing. The stuff I was talking before about developing relationships. I say to people, hey, if you want to make $100,000 with your book, this is an easy math example. If you want to make $100,000 with your book, you can do it one of two ways. You can sell 100,000 books because you're only going to make about $1 royalty per book, right? But if you try to sell 100,000 books, you probably have to spend $1 million to sell that many books because of the marketing costs, right? So that sounds like a really dumb way to try to make $100,000. Or you can use your book and get it into the hands of 1 to 5 to 10 people who can hire you for your services, and that can get you to that goal of $100,000.
Oh, wow.
So much easier, so much more enjoyably, so much faster. Right?
Totally.
That changes the whole game with books, right?
It just changed it. It totally changed my whole thought process about that.
Yeah.
So you help with some of those services?
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, that's all built into my process with the starting with the conversations about the book, right? Is how that door opens, and then through my book writing process into the publishing, the whole time is, how do you get your books? And even before the book is in the world, how do you get conversations with these ideal clients or with these high quality strategic partners, right? So you can make all sorts of good things happen thanks to your book. I actually have a colleague, and this is an exceptional story, so I want to preface with that. She's an author, among other things. She got a consulting gig with a big global company. And sometimes when you work with companies, they will want to buy your book, which is pretty cool, right? And maybe you can integrate it into your consulting and all these kinds of things. So this is what happened with her. They said, hey, so-and-so, we want to buy your book. She said, great. How many? They're like 500,000. Right? I mean, 1 or 2 decision makers buying 500,000 books. right? I mean, that was, what would, according to our math earlier in the conversation, what that would be like a $5 million investment
Absolutely.
to try to sell those 500,000 books, right? So what are you down $9.5 million already?
Right. Right.
How are we going to help people if that happens? Yeah. And then I say to people after I tell that story, even if an organization wants to buy 100 of your books or 50 of your books, or you include them as part of your consulting fee, or do what I did at Stanford, right? Make them part of the speaking fee, or, books included, that kind of thing. Because, why would you sell books in the back of the room for 10 to 20% of the people to buy versus making sure every single person who heard you speak has a book in their hands, so they take it home and it actually sits on their desk in front of them?
What would you say is the best piece of advice you can give to someone who's on that journey to write a book, or actually as an entrepreneur, because we are looking to create 1 million leads? That's a part of our whole motto and our goal. What would you say what's the best piece of advice you can give a new entrepreneur starting out, no matter what age? They can be in their 50s or in their early 20s. What's the best piece of advice you would like to give? And the worst piece of advice someone might have given them that you've deprogrammed them out
of. Yeah. The best piece of advice is actually, even before the business stuff or alongside the business stuff, is get your shit together, get the inner game stuff locked in, locked down, locked in, get a practice, start meditation, whatever that is, but do the work. If you need to go to therapy, do the therapy, but beyond, transactional interactions like therapy, I'm not knocking therapy, have something that you can be doing every day to make make it a part of your life. Because ultimately, again, I'll go back to my friend, the Buddha, right? The idea of, we want to make an island a refuge of ourselves first and foremost, because we don't know what the hell is going to happen at any point of the day, month, year, our lives, right? We don't know what's going to happen with the world, with the weather, with war, with not war, right? But, first and foremost, our businesses, but first and foremost, right? How can we be the island, be the center, keep ourselves in the center of the storm, regardless of what happens? So that's part one. And then part two, about the bad advice. I don't know if it's not so much bad advice as, old thinking about books. People used to think a lot of things like it takes a long time and you can't make money before you're published and you need a traditional publisher because that's the best way to go. All of those things are not true anymore, right? And that's a beautiful thing. You can get clients long before your book is done. You can get your book done very fast, even without AI. And I want to say something about AI real quick. If you're going to use AI as part of your book process, it's a great tool, but don't use it to create stuff. Write your own freaking book, right? Because if the robot writes your book, did you actually write your book, right? You can't stand integrity if you didn't, right? But if you use AI to help you, rework an idea or expand upon something, use it judicially, make sure it's using your voice. Right?
I like that a lot.
Don't sound like the robot because
I like that even better.
There's a big risk in there. But yeah, basically all the or just about all the old thinking about books doesn't apply anymore, and that opens up so much goodness to people like us, and like to the leaders that you're
aspiring toward.
Yeah, and helping to grow and cultivate and all that stuff.
Well, Ben, whose last name means joy, Gioia, you have brought so much joy to our audience today. And I know, especially meeting you, and I'm looking forward to our continued friendship growing and spiritual brotherhood as my, they say spiritual animal. I can't say my spiritual animal because you're human. So, but I got to say, Ben, I have looked forward to this particular interview for such a long time. I thank you on behalf of Make a Spark for being here today so much. And I'm hoping for us to continue, as I mentioned, our friendship and to see where else it goes. Yeah. In addition, I like to say, if anything, please do know that we are here for a platform for you to utilize to further support this, because it is definitely our goal to spread more joy, for no pun intended, and really begin this evolution that we spoke about. So, Ben, where would you like people to reach out to you and to contact you to hear more and or to seek some of your services?
Yeah, thank you so much. So my website is influencewithaheart.com, influencewithaheart.com. There's all sorts of resources on there, ways to connect with me directly. So that, pretty much takes care of a whole bunch of the stuff in a nutshell. And otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn. Delighted to, first and foremost, connect with you. And if you're thinking about a book, whether or not I help you in the future, come talk to me about your book, because let me just help you get clear on your book, because the world needs your book, right? More than ever.
Ooh, that was powerful. The world needs your book. That was powerful. And that was that gem we were searching for to capsulize it perfectly. Ben?
Yep.
that was perfectly capsulized. I thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you. I think I think I said that, and then we broke the internet for like 3 seconds.
I think so. I think that's what happened. I said, Ben, I think so. Ben, thank you, my dear brother. We really do appreciate you being here today. Yeah, well, ladies and gentlemen, you had Ben Gioia with us today, author, 4-time international bestseller, and he has brought what his name has meant, joy, to our listening ears. I want to say conclusively with whole heart thanks again for that. Well, we've mentioned before that, you've heard me mention, the Lovevolution is the revolution that we've all wanted. Let's begin that revolution with the intent that we've heard here today from our hearts. Let the revolution be televised and let it be filled with love. We are so glad to have you all here with us today, joining us today on Make a Spark. My name is Seth Carew Baxter. If you've enjoyed this content, please press like, subscribe, and share with others. Bring more joy and love to others' lives. Peace and one love. Ben, thank you again. We look forward to the next time.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.